The downtown restaurant shimmered under soft golden chandeliers, every polished surface reflecting the glow of luxury. The hum of quiet conversations mixed with the rhythmic clinking of glasses and cutlery. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved in synchronized grace, carrying trays of fine wine and delicately plated dishes. Amidst this scene of refinement sat Victor Hale, a man who never blended in anywhere. He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to shift the atmosphere. The billionaire CEO of Hale Industries, a man known across the business world for his cold logic and unshakable confidence, occupied the corner table by the grand window overlooking the city. He wasn't there for pleasure. He was waiting for his assistant, who, as usual, was late. Victor glanced at his gold wristwatch, impatience flickering in his eyes. To him, time was money, and both were things he never liked to waste. He waved down a passing waitress without looking up. "You come here," he said sharply, his tone cutting through the music that played softly in the background. The waitress stopped mid-step. Her name was Emma. She was 26, working double shifts to pay for her college tuition. Her uniform was neatly pressed, her hair tied back, and her eyes carried the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much of life to be intimidated easily. She approached the table, not rushing, not hesitant, just steady. "Yes, sir?" she asked politely, holding her notepad. Victor finally looked up. His gaze was assessing, calculating, the same way he studied potential investors or rivals. "Tell me," he said, his lips curling into a faint smirk, "which wine do you recommend for someone who owns the room?" A faint whisper passed between two guests nearby. It wasn't the first time Victor Hale had used arrogance to amuse himself. Most servers stumbled over such questions, eager to please. But Emma didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with calm interest. "That depends," she said, her voice steady. "Do you want to impress the room or actually enjoy what you're drinking?" The chatter around them faltered. A businessman at a nearby table paused, mid-bite, glancing over his shoulder. The air thickened, the kind of silence that follows something bold and unexpected. Victor blinked once, caught off guard. For a split second, he wasn't the man with the power. He was just a man confronted by truth wrapped in grace. His smirk deepened, but his eyes held a glint of something new. "Interesting answer," he murmured. "Most people would just list the most expensive bottle." Emma smiled faintly. "Most people confuse price with taste," she replied, turning slightly to glance at the wine rack behind her. "The best wine depends on the company you keep on, the kind of evening you want to remember." That single exchange, brief but electric, shifted the room's energy. The billionaire's arrogance had met its match. And though neither of them knew it yet, this encounter would change both of their lives in ways neither success nor money could ever predict. Story by Pure Hub Kindness. Victor Hale leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable but his mind sharper than ever. He had expected obedience, perhaps nervous laughter, or flustered apology, but instead, this waitress had given him confidence cloaked in wit. It intrigued him. People in his world usually nodded, agreed, and tried to please him. Emma, on the other hand, had just stood in front of him, unafraid to speak the truth. For a man who lived in a world of polished lies, that felt like a rare luxury. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Victor said, swirling the glass of red wine in his hand. His tone carried both amusement and challenge. The restaurant lights reflected in the ruby liquid, dancing across the table like tiny flames. Emma met his gaze calmly. "I don't think," she said. "I just pay attention. Most people don't." Her words were simple, but they landed like stones, skipping across still water. Victor studied her more carefully now. No expensive jewelry, no rehearsed smile, no air of pretense, just an ordinary young woman with extraordinary composure. He found that unsettling. "Pay attention," he echoed. "To what? Exactly." "People," Emma said. "The way they talk, the way they look at others when they think no one's watching. You can learn a lot that way." That answer earned her a small, genuine smile from him, something rare and fleeting. "All right," Victor said, leaning forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "Let's play a little game then. I want to see how sharp you really are." Emma arched an eyebrow, amused but cautious. "A game?" "Yes," he replied. "3 questions. If you can answer all of them correctly or cleverly enough to impress me, I'll give you a $10,000 tip." The people at the nearby tables stopped pretending not to listen. The offer was outrageous, the kind that only a billionaire could make on a whim. Emma's lips parted slightly in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "And if I lose?" Victor smirked. "If you fail even one, you owe me a free meal every week for a year. Consider it a lesson in humility." A soft murmur rippled through the restaurant. Emma looked at him for a long moment, studying the sharp glint in his eyes. Most people would have backed down, but she wasn't. "Most people." "Deal," she said at last, her tone calm but firm. "But I don't play games to impress anyone. I just answer honestly." Victor chuckled softly, tapping his finger on the table. "We'll see how far honesty gets you." Their brief exchange had drawn nearly everyone's attention. Waiters froze mid-step, diners leaned subtly closer, and even the pianist paused between notes. Something unusual was unfolding, a battle, not of status or money, but of wit and character. Victor raised his first question, his voice smooth but tinged with a playful edge. All right then, Emma, let's begin. And as she stood there, facing one of the most powerful men in the city, Emma smiled faintly. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't just a game. It was a test of dignity, and she was ready to prove that humility could stand toe-to-toe with power. The restaurant had gone quiet, the kind of hush that falls before a storm. Every nearby diner pretended to be focused on their meals, but their eyes kept darting toward the corner table, where the billionaire and the waitress faced each other like chess players about to make their opening move. Victor Hale leaned back, folding his hands beneath his chin, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He lived for competition, and this unexpected encounter with a quick-minded waitress had just become his evening entertainment. All right, he said, his voice smooth, almost teasing. First question. He reached for the glass of wine on the table and swirled it lazily, the liquid catching the light. You have a jug of water and a bottle of wine, he began, his tone deliberate and challenging. You pour some wine into the water, then pour the same amount of that mixture back into the wine bottle. Tell me which container now has more the wine in the water, or the water in the wine. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes briefly flicked to the glass, then back to him. She thought for only a few seconds before she answered. They're equal, she said simply. Victor arched a brow. Equal? Yes, she replied. Whatever amount of wine leaves the bottle is replaced by the same amount of water going in. It balances out. A flicker of surprise crossed Victor's face before he could hide it. His assistant, who had just arrived and was standing near the door, looked stunned. That question had stumped graduate interns at his company before. Interesting, Victor murmured. You got that faster than some of my analysts. Emma shrugged lightly, her tone humble but her eyes gleaming. It's not about being fast, she said. It's about seeing things clearly. Most people complicate simple truths. Victor chuckled, genuinely amused. Now, all right, then, let's see how you handle this one. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. If knowledge is power, and power corrupts, what does that make knowledge? Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. That's a trick question, she said. It depends on what kind of person holds the knowledge. Power doesn't corrupt everyone, only those who believe they deserve control because of it. Victor blinked, clearly not expecting that. Go on, he said, curious despite himself. True knowledge, Emma continued, makes people humble, not arrogant. The more you learn, the more you realize how little you actually know. It's only when people stop learning that they start corrupting themselves. The billionaire sat back, the smirk gone, replaced by something soft. The audience around them could sense the shift. What started as a game was quickly becoming something else. He stared at her for a long moment before finally speaking. You know, he said slowly, you don't answer like a waitress. Emma smiled faintly. That's because I'm not just one. I'm a student psychology major. I study how people think, what drives them, and why they act the way they do. Victor nodded, impressed. So that's why you weren't intimidated. I just see you as another person, she said simply. Not a billionaire, not a challenge, just a man who wants to be understood. For the first time in years, Victor Hale was speechless. Around them, the low murmur of the restaurant began again, but the air had changed. The billionaire had expected a quick victory, but instead, he'd found something far rarer. A mind that matched his, guided by heart instead of ego. He smiled faintly, eyes gleaming with newfound respect. You've answered two, he said quietly. One more to go. Victor Hale leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The confident smirk that once dominated his face had softened into a thoughtful expression. Around him, the restaurant's energy had shifted. The once curious glances had turned into silent awe. People could feel it. Something meaningful was unfolding. For the first time, the billionaire's usual armor of arrogance was starting to crack. He drummed his fingers lightly against the table, pretending to think, but in truth, he was stalling. The young woman standing before him had outsmarted him twice, not just with intellect, but with depth. Her calm composure and quiet strength fascinated him in a way boardroom negotiations never could. Finally, Victor leaned back, exhaled slowly, and said, all right, final question. Emma folded her arms lightly. Waiting, he looked directly into her eyes, his voice lowering. You work here, serving tables, earning minimum wage. Do you honestly believe you're smarter than me? The words hung in the air like a challenge, one last attempt to reassert dominance. But Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled slightly, the kind of smile that said she'd been asked that question many times in different ways. Smarter, she repeated softly. No, I don't think that's the right word. Victor tilted his head. Then what is? She met his gaze without hesitation. Wiser, maybe, or at least more awake to what matters. The room fell completely silent. Even the piano player paused mid-note. Emma took a small step closer, her voice steady but warm. You've spent your life chasing money, power, and recognition. And you've probably won more battles than anyone else in this city. But the problem with winning all the time is that you forget what losing teaches: humility, empathy, gratitude. She paused, her eyes softening. Those things make you human, Mr. Hale. Without them, all your skyscrapers, your companies, your billions, They're just empty towers. Victor stared at her, stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not in boardrooms, not in interviews, not even in private. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Her tone wasn't rude or defiant. It was sincere, almost compassionate, like she wasn't trying to insult him but to reach him. She continued quietly, "You see, people like me don't get noticed by people like you, not because we're less intelligent, but because we don't play the same game. You measure success in numbers. I measure it in moments. You build things that touch the sky. I try to build things that touch hearts." That line hit him harder than anything she had said before. A long silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the restaurant's air conditioner. And then something unexpected happened. Victor began to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but a deep, genuine one that echoed through the room. "You know," he said finally, shaking his head, "I can't even be mad. You win." He reached for his checkbook, tore out a page, and began to write. Emma blinked in confusion. "Sir, that's not necessary." He handed her the check with a grin. "It's more than necessary." The room buzzed with whispers again, diners exchanging looks of astonishment. The waitress who had stood up to the billionaire had just done what no one in his world dared to do. She'd made him see himself clearly, and though neither of them knew it yet, that moment would ripple far beyond the walls of that restaurant. Story by pure hub kindness. The restaurant buzzed in disbelief. A billionaire had just been humbled by a waitress, and instead of lashing out, he was laughing, genuinely laughing. The sharp, intimidating man who had walked in earlier was gone, replaced by someone oddly human. Victor Hale tore the check from his book, his expensive pen gliding across the paper with ease, as if money were nothing more than ink and gesture. He pushed the paper toward her. "Here," he said, $50,000. You've earned it." Emma's eyes widened. "50,000, she echoed, thinking she'd misheard. Victor nodded, still smiling. "I promised 10,000 if you won, but I think you deserve more. You didn't just outsmart me, you taught me something I didn't expect to learn tonight." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Several diners stared openly now, their curiosity overtaking their manners. Emma looked down at the check, her fingers trembling slightly as she held it. The number was real life-changing, almost unreal for someone working double shifts and studying part-time, but after a long moment, she gently placed it back on the table. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I can't take it." Victor blinked. "Can't? Why not?" She smiled, her eyes kind. "Because lessons lose their meaning when you attach a price to them. What I said wasn't for money. It was just truth, and truth doesn't need to be bought." Victor's expression softened even more. He looked at her, really looked at her, not as a server, not as someone beneath him, but as a person with a kind of strength that money couldn't buy. "You're a rare one," he murmured. "Most people would have taken the check and posted it online by now." Emma chuckled lightly. "Maybe, but I'm not most people." She paused before continuing. "I work here to pay for college. I'm studying behavioral psychology. I'm more interested in understanding people than impressing them. This job teaches me more about humanity than a boardroom ever could." Victor's hand hovered over the check, then pulled it back. He leaned forward, intrigued. "In that case," he said, "how would you like to work for me?" Emma blinked, unsure if he was joking. "I'm serious." He continued, "Not as a waitress, something better. A paid internship at Hale Industries. You'd get real experience, access to research, mentorship, and you could still finish your studies. No strings attached." The offer hung between them, tempting and sincere. Emma hesitated for a long moment. "I appreciate that," she said, "but I'm not sure I belong in your world." Victor smiled. "You might belong more than you think. People like you are what my world needs." Emma thought about it, then smiled back. "I'll think about it," she said, her tone gentle but firm. She picked up her tray and turned to serve another table, as if the entire room hadn't just witnessed a billionaire offering her a chance of a lifetime. Victor watched her go, still smiling. For the first time in years, he felt inspired, the kind of inspiration that didn't come from profit margins or corporate wins, but from something real, human decency. He leaned back, looking out at the glittering city beyond the restaurant's window, and whispered to himself, maybe kindness really is the smartest investment. And in the soft glow of that evening, something in Victor Hale changed forever. A week later, the same golden light spilled through the tall restaurant windows, painting the marble floors in warm tones. The place was quieter this time, less crowded, more peaceful. The piano player's melody floated softly through the air as familiar waitstaff whispered to each other, still buzzing from the story that had spread across the city like wildfire. The night the billionaire challenged a waitress and lost had become something of a legend. When Victor Hale walked in again, there was no entourage, no designer suit, and no air of superiority. He wore a simple shirt with rolled sleeves, his expression calm and reflective. The same man who once saw the world through the lens of profit, now walked as though the weight of something greater rested on his mind. He didn't call for attention, didn't demand his usual corner table. Instead, he asked quietly, "Is Emma working tonight?" One of the waiters nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, Emma emerged, her familiar notepad in hand and an amused smile on her lips. "Mr. Hale," she said with a teasing tone. "Back for another game." Victor chuckled softly. "No games this time," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "Just a conversation." She hesitated, then sat down. There was a strange comfort between them now, a mutual respect that neither of them had to define. "I've been thinking about what you said," Victor began, his gaze steady. "About meaning, about how success without kindness is just noise." Emma listened quietly, folding her hands on the table. "You actually thought about it?" she asked lightly. He smiled. "More than you'd think. I've built companies that made millions, but I've never built something that mattered beyond the balance sheet. That night, you made me realize how hollow that feels." For a moment, silence settled between them, broken only by the faint clinking of glasses in the distance. "So what are you going to do about it?" Emma finally asked. Victor leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "I already started. I've launched a mentorship program, Project Kindness. It's designed to help young people who come from humble backgrounds learn leadership and empathy together. Business schools teach strategy, but no one teaches compassion. I want to change that." Emma blinked, taken aback. "You did that because of me?" He nodded. "Because of the truth you gave me. You reminded me that people don't grow from wealth, they grow from connection." A soft smile curved across her lips. "That's incredible," she said sincerely. Victor's expression warmed. "I was hoping you'd help me with it. You've got the heart and insight I lack." Emma's eyes softened. "You know," she said gently, "I think the old you might have thought of this as charity. But the man sitting in front of me now, he actually means it." He laughed quietly. "You're right, I do." As they talked, the sunlight outside faded into the soft glow of evening. Their conversation stretched on about life, humanity, and the strange ways lessons come when least expected. When Victor finally stood to leave, he turned to her and said, "You taught me something that will outlast every company I'll ever build." Emma smiled. "Then I guess we both learned something," she replied. As he walked out into the cool night air, the sign above the restaurant's door flickered under the streetlight, and the story of the billionaire and the waitress continued to ripple across social media. Under one name, Pure Hub Kindness. It wasn't just a story about wit anymore. It was a story about awakening, compassion, and the simple truth that intelligence shines brightest when guided by kindness. Story by Pure Hub Kindness.